welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. I'm your host now, nearly 7 years and close to 500 episodes taped with all sorts of people from all walks of life. Twice weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays, I have the privilege of having conversations with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, intrapreneurs, also wannapreneurs, people who are CEOs or mid-level leaders. Perhaps they are celebrities, book authors, academics, researchers, you name it, all focused on investing in you and making you a better leader, perhaps formally in your career or even informally less in your personal life or with your family. Franklin Covey, of course, founded in part by Stephen Covey, the author of the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, who I was privileged to spend about 15 of my 25 years in the firm mentoring under, and he would be delighted to see all the guests that have come on with common values and common vision for leadership and entrepreneurial growth. Our guest today is the renowned entrepreneur and leader, Frank Lorenzo. You may know him as the former CEO of a variety of airlines, including Continental Airlines, and Frank has recently released a bit of a business memoir that talks about the lessons that he learned across his many decades in not just the aviation business, but in related businesses as well. His new book is titled Flying for Peanuts. The tagline is Tough Deals, Steep Bargains, and Revolution in the Skies. Joining us from the East Coast today is Frank Lorenzo. Welcome to On Leadership.
Thank you, Scott. Nice to be here.
It is an honor to have you here. There is a reason why your book is titled Flying for Peanuts. Would you rewind a little bit to that nomenclature? I think there was a marketing campaign around that. Reorient everybody to why the book is titled Flying for Peanuts.
Well, it was actually the suggestion of a daughter of ours. The book was named after a fare program that we initiated in 1986, just before deregulation was legislated, and it was the first low-cost airfare program approved by the Civil Aeronautics Board before it was the law of the land. In other words, before deregulation legislation. So it was very unique. It was the first of its kind, but we did it, and it was very successful for us. So we thought that that title for the book made a lot of sense.
I imagine it's probably near and dear to your heart from all your time revolutionizing air travel. Frank, lots of accolades, lots of awards. You've created enormous opportunity for employees and shareholders and stakeholders and vendors and passengers. Somewhere along the way, you were recognized with the moniker as one of the nation's toughest leaders. Tell us why that title stuck. What was going on that somewhere, somehow in the media, you were recognized as one of industry's toughest leaders?
Well, the unions had better PR than we did. One of my many mistakes was that I didn't put enough into public relations. But the fact is, we had a tough job. And the media tended to bring together a tough job and a tough leader, a tough guy. That was nice, and it was convenient for the unions. We had an impossible situation. We were the smallest of all of the certificated airlines, and if there's one airline that was going to perish under deregulation, it was going to be our little airline. And we had to take the steps to lower our costs. We had all low-cost carriers around us very shortly after deregulation was passed. And in fact, we actually started one of them, New York Air in New York. But for Continental had to find a way to exist. And that earned me, and confronting that earned me the enmity of the major union, of the airline unions.
Frank, at the time when you would see yourself portrayed in business magazines and newspapers and on the evening news, what was the most frustrating with how you were perhaps being portrayed that just wasn't accurate or just wasn't true, or wasn't core to your values?
No, I mean, it was far from the truth, and far from where we are. I mean, We were a very family-oriented company. I was a leader that was known for being close to our people. Um, and they didn't care about any of that. In fact, on a number of occasions, we actually had an agreement worked out with the local union heads, but the national union vetoed it because the national union didn't want to see any precedent set uh, at the local level. We had that with the machinists union. We had that with the pilots union. They were always very troubled. The national union was always very troubled by thinking that deregulation was a virus that somehow would spread around to the big guys unless they did something to stamp it out.
You're the son of Spanish immigrants that came to the US, gosh, I'm guessing close to 100 years ago. And you really built a career for yourself. Your parents helped to sacrifice to send you to fantastic schools. You graduated from Harvard Business School through a lot of hard work and odd jobs and perseverance. What are some of the lessons that you teach your children, your grandchildren of your success that maybe you want to remind parents of today that perhaps you're seeing lost, or with leaders? What are some of the principles that you led your career by that you want to remind people, don't forget to do this, don't forget the value of that?
Well, that's a very fair question, Scott. And I've always tried to emphasize among our kids that it was important to have a goal, to try to make your goal be within reason, makes sense within your resources, to be very kind and generous to other people, to be very honest, very important, that they be recognized as being very straightforward and honest. But there were a lot of things that we, as a leader of a small troubled company, I focused very much on, the empathy of our people. We had family visits. I was always out visiting with the people on the field, but this never got in the press. And the people made me out to be this tough guy that ate his children for breakfast and his employees for lunch.
Well, I think there's a great lesson here to be learned in the modern day, which is whether you want to or not, the CEO cannot be in the witness protection program. You have to have an Instagram account. You have to have a LinkedIn account. You have to have a YouTube platform so that you can shepherd the mission of the company. You can address wrong news or crises. I'm guessing one of the hardest jobs of being a chairman or CEO of an airline is when there is an emergency or an accident or some snafu. You hear now, it seems like every week there is some mid-air collision. There is a passenger that is trying to open the door mid-air. There is an abuse of the airline crew staff. I mean, every week you now hear of some outrageous story that's going on. And I think it's important that the leadership have access to share their side of it. Was there a time in your own career when something was going on, perhaps beyond the negotiation with the unions, where you'd wished you'd had a better pulpit, a better bully pulpit, where if you had told your side of the story, clients, investors, the world, what it might have been more charitable?
Oh, I think that's a very fair point. Very much. We regretted not having more of an ability to be out there in the 80s when I was CEO of Continental and explain to them that the losses that the company had even before we acquired the company were just continuing. They really hadn't changed much, even though we had done all kinds of things to try to lower the losses and make the company economically workable. But we didn't have a bully pulpit, like you say. We did not have a good place to be out there and get our word out, and I wish we did. And by the way, one of the major reasons for writing this book albeit many years after this happened, because I kept putting it off, was to set the record straight, to really describe what it was like under regulation from the inside, from somebody who had lived through it, and then also explain what we faced, and how so much of the union propaganda was just that. It was propaganda, because the unions did not want to, particularly the pilots union, did not want to face up to the realities. They wanted to just keep the status quo going indefinitely, and it couldn't work, and didn't. Many of the companies ended up in one form of bankruptcy or another.
I think this is a valuable conversation because there's a difference between the celebrity CEO, right, who's just blathering on about their political insights or themselves, and it's sort of a bit of an ego game, and the chairman or CEO and her or his ability to shape the conversation, to share the perspective. And so I would advise anyone who is a leader, you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, perhaps you're even on a board of directors, to responsibly collaborate, obviously with the communication protocol, but to build your platform, because you're going to need it. You're absolutely going to need it when the time arises. I see so many CEOs of Fortune 5000s that either, I hate social media or I don't like doing that. Well, it's now a necessity to be able to shape the conversation. So I'm glad we had this particular discussion. Okay, famously, several decades ago, you executed a sale, I believe it was Eastern Airlines shuttle, to then aviation expert at all, Donald Trump, who I think renamed it the Trump shuttle. And as much as I don't particularly care about what happened after that, no doubt you had some negotiations, conversations with Donald Trump, who has now been reelected, the new second again president. Politics mostly aside, many viewers, many listeners, many voters voted for him because of his self-acclaimed business acumen, art of the deal, him being the smartest negotiator alive. What experience would you share from your time with what is now the leader of the free world, shaking things up like we've never seen before? Would you either calm our listeners or incite our listeners around your own experience with Donald Trump's ethics, business savvy, negotiating genius? What would you tell us about him? I've never met him, don't know.
First of all, my experience with Trump was when he was in his 40s. So you have to preface that we've all changed a lot since we were in our 40s. And I assume that you can say the same thing for President Trump. Dealing with him was not easy. It lasted over a year, but it wasn't all because of him. It was also because basically we didn't want to sell the shuttle. If there was any reasonable way to avoid it, we would have done it. And not because it was a tremendous profit center for us. It was at one point in Easton's history, but wasn't anymore, given the competition from New York Air that we started, given the competition from Pan Am in later years. There was a lot of competition out there that it didn't have before. So it wasn't the big profitable thing, but we wanted to avoid selling it. I sat down with the unions, in fact, with the pilot union, and had a conversation about trying to avoid selling it. And the person I sat down with was actually very interested, but he was vetoed by the national union. Trump showed me being a good businessman. He waited us out. He knew how to negotiate price. Of course, we knew a few things about that too. Ultimately, we really wanted to get a deal done because we needed the cash. We needed the $365 million, and he was right there. A lot of the talk about how things went after he acquired it often forgets about the fact that we also had a Kuwaiti invasion that hurt many airlines. not just the Trump shuttle. So you have to sort of discount that a bit from the stuff you hear.
In the course of your career, you bought and sold many enterprises and investors. You've merged with many companies. If you were advising a board of directors that was executing an acquisition, same size, larger, smaller, maybe irrespective, what do most C-suite leaders underestimate when it comes to bringing two existing businesses together? Perhaps they're looking for operational efficiencies or bigger market share or better profitability. They're growing by acquisition. Irrespective of that, what advice would you give people in terms of the checklist of things to be thinking about? Maybe it's people, maybe it's culture, maybe it's leaders, maybe it's clarity of message. Remind us what lands on the cutting room floor that shouldn't, to help ensure successful mergers.
Well, Scott, first of all, let me correct you. There's only one merger that we did. That was the merger of Texas International Airlines with Continental. And there you had a all of the above situation. Continental was located in California. Literally, the office was located right near the Pacific Coast beaches. When we first took the company over, I used to go out of the office and go run along the beach. And that was the sort of culture of Continental to a great extent. Texas International, out at Hobby Airport, was much more of a frugal, tougher type of company. So merging them, we immediately had a cultural issue. We had an issue, and it was a big issue because the California crew, the Continental crew, thought that the Texans were a bunch of hiccups and and didn't know much about the business, while the Texans looked upon the Californians as a bit of a laid back, lazy type of crew. And there were bits of truth in some of these feelings, but that was the main merger we did. And we had culture, we had financial issues. The cost of stuff was much more than we realized, and the whole attitude towards the company. We walked into Continental and they had these beautiful areas where you could see meal service that was on Continental flights. But great meals were not part of the deal anymore after deregulation. It was having an efficient, low-cost model that would attract the public.
If I'm not mistaken, you and your wife have been married for 53 years. Do I have the math right?
I think it's 52, but yes, you're pretty close.
52 years. That's unusual for someone who's known as the toughest boss in America, someone who's been through, what have you done right to balance raising 4 kids, encouraging your wife to stay married to you for 52 plus years, and having a remarkable career that you've gone on to become still an investor, an advisor, and a philanthropist? What are some of the things you've done right that you're most proud of?
I wish she could answer that question. Well, first of all, I was very oriented to the family. And it wasn't just my family, but it was my employees' families. I always insisted that they get home to their families at, not exactly at an early hour, but at 7 o'clock. I would really encourage them to end meetings and just go and home and enjoy your family. I would always try to get home to see the kids before they went to bed or while in order to eat with them. And Sharon and I have just shared a lot of these ups and downs together, and that's continued really even after our airline days. We both have just a lot of things in common, and I guess maybe we're both were very lucky. We happened to find partners that worked out well for them. But my wife is a modest person. I try to be respectful of that too, and try to be modest in my own way. So, that we've evolved. We've both have changed. My wife had a teaching career after her child raising period. So that's how you do it. And we had 4 children too. So there was a time when my wife had to deal with, and I say my wife, we both did, but my wife was the one that was there sort of 24/7 at home. And we had 4 children from 1 to 10.
My wife and I have 3 sons that are 10, 13, and 14, and she did not realize that she was opening up a free dry cleaners, because all she does all day long, and my wife is well educated, is running 2 washing machines, one on the top floor, one on the bottom floor, and dryers simultaneously all day long to wash these 3 young boys' clothes. And man, are they so grateful. No, they have no idea what she's doing, right? They show no gratitude. I'm interested to know, what does the common air traveler not understand about the airline business? And if they did, perhaps they would be better customers. They would be more patient. Maybe they would make more demands because the industry isn't serving them well. I'm not looking for a negative or a positive, but it always feels like every flight is 3 hours away from an absolute mutiny, whether it's on the concourse or it's in the air or it's circling or whatever it is. What do you want the air flying public to know?
Well, the airline business is a very complicated, complex business. There's many, many moving parts. And the average person doesn't appreciate all of the moving parts that the management has to deal with, whether it be the airport, whether it be the weather. We've just encountered some difficulties ourselves in getting back from a trip that we recently made. I mean, it's all out there, and it's all part of it. But one of the things that I get annoyed at when I see it is that this argument that airlines have these junk fees. The fact of the matter is, one of the ways airlines have kept fares from going much higher is by developing another revenue stream. And they've done this very effectively over the last 20 years by unbundling, as it's called, unbundling their product, charging for bags, under the argument that, listen, if somebody comes and doesn't have bags, that lowers the cost of carrying them to the airline. So it's not crazy for them to charge for a bag or for 2 bags, and that sort of thing. But people don't like the junk fees. But on the other hand, they like the low fares that we still have. If you compare fares today with the fares back in our day, they compare very favorably.
I don't think most passengers equate their baggage with weight, with lift, drag, and thrust, and fuel. And I don't think everybody puts that together. They, again, just see the optics of it. Tell us what you're focused on. I mean, you are a titan of industry. You're one of the most revered leaders from certainly my generation in terms of entrepreneurialism. What are you focused on now?
Well, I've been focused on getting the book done. By the way, that was a major undertaking. It took a lot to get the book accomplished, and now it's sort of in the back
nine, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, the back nine, so to speak, of the book, and there are a lot of pieces there in connection with that. But I'm focused on the business we have, and on some nonprofits. I'm very active with a couple of organizations that I'm very, very interested in. Sharon and I love to travel. We enjoy we enjoy that. And, we try to stay in good health. We have, good habits of exercise and so forth. My wife was just telling me how proud she was that she just was doing a little bike riding. And, we enjoy bike riding together, just as an example.
Tim, I'd like to end our conversation about safety and maybe crisis management. Every airline's worst nightmare is technical malfunction, right? A terrorist attack, a security breach, something that puts the passengers at risk, and the crew, for that matter. In the course of your many decades in aviation, did you experience one of those? And how did you deal with it? How would you advise other airline leaders to deal with it when inevitably they'll face it at some point in their career, or if not theirs, their organization's career?
Well, we had one very bad accident during my time. We had a DC-9 that was taking off from Denver, and it wasn't able to get airborne and crashed and killed many of the people on board. I was driving with my family in Houston, and I got a call over the phone, the car phone in those days, saying that the system control, which was our flight control, wanted me to know that there was a plane that was down in Denver, and they didn't have any of the details. But then when I got to our house, I got the details, and I was just shocked. And what do you do? I told my wife I'm going to the airport and I'm flying up there. Oh, she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm not sure, but I just want to be with our people." And that's what I did. And in fact, I went to the hospitals and visited with some of the injured people. In fact, I got a note just recently from one of the very injured and disfigured passengers that was on the airplane. But that moment is just a horrible moment. And every airline executive just lives in fear of the time when you get that call that I got, and telling you that your biggest fears is being realized.
Can you share with us?
Fortunately, it doesn't happen often.
Yes.
Fortunately, we have a great, safe system.
Yeah.
I don't think it gets enough credit for that.
I think you are right. Can you share with us the content of the note that was sent to you recently?
Well, I didn't catch that.
Can you share with us the content of the note that was sent to you recently from the survivor? You mentioned that one of the survivors has sent you a note.
Oh, yes. Just saying that he was doing well, that he had recovered. I mean, this was a man that was so disfigured that they couldn't recognize him initially, couldn't identify him. I went up to the hospital and visited with his wife, who was there, and it was just saying that he really appreciated the attention that we had given him many years back, and I was obviously quite flattered.
How generous and kind of him to do that.
Yes.
After so much
Yes.
trauma and tragedy and pain, and I'm sure every possible emotion. Your book is...
That's one of the things about this book. The book has brought us so many comments out of the woodworks that has been very exciting to see.
Well, I'm delighted for your impact and the fact that you took the time and discipline to write it. So many fascinating stories, riveting, great leadership lessons, horrifying little details here and there of what goes on behind the scene and such. And anybody who's interested in a career in aviation, or anybody who's interested in the history of great entrepreneurialism, you've got to pick up a copy of Flying for Peanuts, Tough Deals, Steep Bargains, and Revolution in the Skies by Frank
Or
Lorenzo.
a chapter on Trump, the whole chapter on Trump.
And there's no shortage.
All kinds of pictures.
Yeah, there's no shortage of pictures of Donald Trump in here as well. I'll tell you, I especially love the picture of you, and I think it was your son and Barbara Walters. That's a lovely picture Congrats on finding and being able to have all these pictures in the book as well. And nothing less, what a great gift to all those former employees of Continental and your family as well. Frank Lorenzo, thank you for your time today. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Scott.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.